The cause of death was recorded as natural causes. The laboratory findings indicated otherwise, revealing sharp force trauma upon closer examination. Lacerations observed on the deceased's body were extensive and indicative of a violent altercation involving multiple strikes with a sharp implement. Initial autopsy reports did not capture the full extent of these injuries, leading to an initial misclassification of the cause of death. Upon reevaluation of tissue samples under high magnification, signs of hemorrhage and contusion consistent with sharp force trauma became evident. These findings prompted further investigation into potential defensive wounds and the presence of foreign debris, such as fibers or particles, that could help identify the weapon used in this case. The revised forensic analysis highlighted a need for meticulous examination to accurately determine the cause of death and provide closure for next of kin involved in this tragic event. Chapter: Case Background. The incident under investigation occurred at a private residence in downtown Springfield on March 15. At approximately 9:30 p.m., a neighbor reported unusual activity to local law enforcement after observing lights flickering and hearing what sounded like arguing inside the home. Upon arrival, officers found the front door unlocked and entered the premises without delay. Inside, they discovered disarray in the living room, with furniture overturned and items scattered across the floor. Further investigation led them to a bedroom where the deceased was located on the bed, exhibiting visible signs of injury that prompted immediate medical attention from first responders. Initial observations noted multiple lacerations and bruising, leading investigators to suspect sharp force trauma as the cause of death. The scene indicated a struggle had occurred, given the disturbed state of personal belongings and evidence suggesting defensive wounds on various objects within the vicinity. The deceased was pronounced dead at the scene by emergency medical personnel due to extensive blood loss and multiple injuries consistent with sharp force trauma. The case was promptly turned over to the county medical examiner's office for further examination. Chapter: Initial findings upon arrival at the reported incident location. First responders noted a seated position of the deceased on a kitchen stool, displaying no immediate signs of movement or responsiveness. The scene was confined to the residential kitchen area, with minimal disturbance indicative of limited mobility post-injury. Initial medical assessment by emergency services revealed multiple superficial and deep lacerations across the torso, neck, and upper extremities. These injuries exhibited characteristics consistent with sharp force trauma, including incised wounds and punctures with irregular edges suggesting a non-bladed implement. The absence of defensive wounds suggested possible incapacitation due to initial injury severity or sudden onset of the traumatic event. Based on the visible lacerations and their distribution, coupled with the lack of environmental evidence indicating prolonged struggle, the preliminary manner of death was classified as homicide pending further forensic examination and toxicology results. The absence of defensive wounds suggested possible incapacitation due to initial injury severity or sudden onset of the traumatic event. Chapter: Forensic investigation at the scene. Investigators meticulously documented the presence of multiple sharp force injuries to the deceased's torso and extremities. Forensic evidence included bloodstain patterns indicating a struggle prior to death. The collection process involved swabbing blood samples for DNA analysis and securing potential weapon fragments found embedded in wounds. Notably, the absence of a primary suspect weapon at the scene raised questions about the perpetrator's method of disposal. All collected items were placed into evidence bags with unique identifiers and chain of custody forms completed to ensure integrity and traceability throughout legal proceedings. The laboratory analysis of sharp force trauma in this case involved a comprehensive suite of tests to elucidate the nature and extent of lacerations observed on the deceased. Microscopic examination of tissue samples revealed irregular, jagged edges consistent with cutting instrument injury. Hematoxylin and eosin staining was employed to visualize cellular damage patterns indicative of acute trauma. Histological analysis demonstrated disrupted collagen fibers in wound margins, confirming sharp force causation. Tissue panels were run to detect the presence of blood pigments and other biomarkers that indicated recent bleeding. Quantitative PCR assays identified elevated levels of inflammatory cytokines at injury sites, suggesting an active immune response following the incident. Detection thresholds for these analyses ranged from 10 pg/ml for cytokine quantification to 5 ng/ml for pigment identification. Analysis of sharp force trauma at the scene revealed multiple lacerations across various parts of the deceased's body. Forensic evidence, including blood spatter patterns and trace elements on weapons found nearby, established a sequence of events indicating an altercation followed by fatal injury. The postmortem interval was estimated through entomological examination and decomposition stage assessment, suggesting approximately 24 to 36 hours had elapsed since death. This estimation was corroborated by environmental factors such as temperature and humidity at the scene, yielding a confidence level of 85% in the timeline reconstruction. This analysis confirmed that the deceased sustained injuries consistent with multiple sharp force incidents, likely from different weapons, before succumbing to hemorrhagic shock. The timeline also contradicted initial speculation regarding the presence of a single assailant, supporting evidence for more than one individual involved in the incident. The examination of sharp force trauma reveals multiple lacerations on the deceased's torso and extremities. Each wound exhibits characteristics indicative of a bladed weapon, including clean incisions, feathering, and undermining of tissue consistent with slicing actions rather than chopping or stabbing motions. The distribution and pattern of these injuries suggest defensive wounds on the hands and upper arms, alongside more severe lacerations to vital areas that likely contributed to the fatal outcome. While the specific type of implement cannot be definitively determined from the wounds alone, comparisons with known weapon patterns in our database support the hypothesis that a thin bladed instrument was utilized. The presence of blood spatter on nearby surfaces provides corroborative evidence regarding the sequence and dynamics of the incident. Under oath, I would confirm these observations as indicative of an altercation involving sharp force weapons, emphasizing both the forensic certainty derived from direct injury characteristics and the interpretive aspects concerning weapon identification based on circumstantial evidence. The presence of blood spatter on nearby surfaces provides corroborative evidence regarding the sequence and dynamics of the incident. Chapter: Resolution upon comprehensive examination of all collected evidence, including macroscopic and microscopic analysis of lacerations. The final determination is that the deceased sustained sharp force trauma resulting in multiple incised wounds consistent with a bladed weapon. The presence of blood spatter on nearby surfaces provides corroborative evidence regarding the sequence and dynamics of the incident. Initially, the cause of death was suspected to be asphyxiation due to strangulation marks observed around the neck. However, subsequent toxicological screening revealed no anoxic brain damage, thus excluding hypoxia as a primary contributing factor. Further forensic pathology investigation identified defensive injuries on the hands indicative of a struggle with a sharp implement. Microscopic examination of tissue samples from laceration sites confirmed the presence of epithelial cells consistent with human skin and fibers matching those found at the crime scene, suggesting the weapon was likely worn or used by another individual involved in the altercation. Further forensic pathology investigation identified defensive injuries on the hands indicative of a struggle with a sharp implement. Thus, the central finding of multiple sharp force injuries has been substantiated as the direct cause of death. This determination clarifies that the initial assessment underestimated the significance of these wounds and overemphasized signs of manual strangulation. This case underscores the critical importance of meticulous documentation and detailed photography in capturing the extent and nature of sharp force injuries. Comprehensive analysis, including wound pattern recognition and corroborative witness accounts, enhances the forensic narrative. The file remains open.